So, Matt, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, and thank you for having me.
Sure. Yeah. So, today we're going to talk about the Horseshoe Curve, which you work there at the Altoona Railroaders Museum itself.
Correct, I do.
So, I'm sure pretty much everybody is somewhat familiar with the Horseshoe Curve. But if you don't, it basically, would I be correct to say it gets its name from that it looks like a big horseshoe?
Correct. You are correct.
Yeah. So, and for our regular followers, if you remember, our very first episode that we did was about the Allegheny Portage Railroad, which
Hmm.
was the predecessor to the Horseshoe Curve. Actually, it was the Horseshoe Curve that put it out of business. So,
Yes.
um, let's start with the building of the curve. So, why was the curve necessary to begin with?
So the curve was necessary for the Pennsylvania Railroad because the mountain range, the Allegheny Mountains, separated Philadelphia slash Harrisburg to Pittsburgh. And this was a huge problem even for the canals, as Allegheny Portage was made for that. There was no quick and easy way to get from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh. So the curve was created to allow this passage um, along the mountain to get to Pittsburgh.
And for anybody that's maybe not familiar with railroads, why would be necessary to keep the gradients down? Because I'm familiar with the Allegheny Mountains. They're not entirely steep per se.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the gradient is important. Right now, the grade is at a 1.34% overall for the horseshoe curve. And that's because if your grade is too high, your steam engines will never make it up the hill and will fall back down the hill. And if it's too low, if it's going down the hill, it will go too fast and the train will never be able to stop. So the designer, John Thompson, he had to be very precise with the exact gradient to make sure that the steam engines, all the way back from the 1850s when it was constructed to even the diesels today that Norfolk Southern runs, can make it up and down the mountain safely.
And when they built the curve, how was it built? Because it was not machine built, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct on that. So the horseshoe curve was built between 1851 and 1854. It opened for service on February 15th, 1854. It was built by Irishmen, completely Irish, with pickaxes and explosives only. Worked in all weather conditions, got paid pennies to work, and through all their hard work, the curve was opened in 3 years.
3 years. Wow, that's incredible. And, I-
Yes.
and I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm going to ask: is
Mm-hmm.
there any idea how much dirt and rock they actually had to excavate by hand?
I don't know exact numbers, but I do know that the visitor center that sits there now sits on the rock and the dirt that was exploded or taken off the
Oh,
mountain.
really?
Yes.
I see. I didn't even know that. I thought that was just kind of the way it worked out. Now, what? How important was the curve then? Because, like I said before, when we talked about the Allegheny Portage Railroad, it would take weeks to get across
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Opening this curve, how long would it have taken somebody to get across Pennsylvania, say from Philly to Pittsburgh?
It went from weeks to a couple of days.
And that's incredible. Just in three
Yes.
years' time.
Yep.
Now, how big of a train would have traversed the curve at the beginning? Because we think now you see the curve, you see the diesels now of 100 plus cars that
Yeah.
come over. But that in the
Yeah.
in the late 1800s, how big of a train would have been expected?
So you would have seen one engine in the front, and then you would have seen anywhere between 5 to 10 passenger cars or freight cars, depending on if they were full or not, would really depend on your length of the train. And then you would have a helper in the back. And those helpers always, if you're going from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh, that helper would help you from Altoona up the mountain. And then if you were coming from the other direction, Pittsburgh to Harrisburg, that helper unit would take you to Altoona, and that helper unit would stay in Altoona just as it does today.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Now, how much of an impact did it have on the economy of nearby cities like Altoona and Johnstown? Because before they were pretty isolated, even though they're only, I don't know, 30 some miles apart.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Altoona was just a little farm town prior to the Pennsylvania Railroad coming in, and Altoona being at the foot of the mountains made it the ideal location to put the shops for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And over time, Altoona would become known as Railroad City, the largest railroad complex in the world, because you needed all the machine shops in Altoona because all the engines going up and down the mountain needed to be repaired, cleaned, or just worked on. And instead of taking them all the way back to Harrisburg, Philadelphia, just do it right there in Altoona. So the Pennsylvania Railroad did everything in Altoona. And Johnstown became a very big steel town with Bethlehem Steel. And the Pennsylvania Railroad was a pretty big client of the steel for the rail, and was in Johnstown quite often.
Now let's, you mentioned it there. Maybe if we could dive into it a little bit, even the railroad shops and stuff there in Altoona, because I say if anybody
Yeah.
hasn't seen the shops of Altoona even today, like the Juniata works there, they are extraordinarily massive, and they've been downsized considerably since the heyday of steam engines.
Yes.
But that
Yes. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say because you mentioned it, but I mean, heck, they also built locomotives there
Correct.
from the ground
Yes.
up.
Yep. Yeah. So there were the Juniata shops, and then you had the Altoona shops. So Juniata was originally its own separate shops until Altoona annexed Juniata. Then the shops became essentially one. They're still called the Juniata shops. Norfolk Southern uses them today. In terms of the Altoona shops, there's only three buildings that remain from the Altoona shop heydays. It is our current museum building, which was a kind of like an office building built in 1882. The Altoona Pipe and Steel building, and you can see that building because right on the side of their building says Pipe and Steel. In the little office building next to our museum and Pipe and Steel, they use it as their office building. It used to be the firehouse for the Pennsylvania Railroad. So, in terms of the Altoona shops, those are the only three buildings that remain from the shop complex. But luckily, we still have the Juniata shops. But like you said, they are not the same size as they used to be.
Yeah, and I mean, if you go just past the Juniata shops, you can still see where the old sidings and stuff where the tracks have been tore out, and you can still kind of get a picture of how vast the Pennsylvania Railroad was before it got downsized thanks to you know poor spending and freight, and
Yep.
we might as well not get into the theory of why it went bankrupt. Uh,
Yes, yes.
but I like you say, I recommend anybody get down there, and which while you're at it, get over to the Railroad Museum and check it out, which we're going to talk about shortly. Um, but now they're at the curve too. We'll leap ahead a little bit. You actually have right now a diesel locomotive that's on display outside, and previously you had
Correct.
a steamer there previously, which they're hopefully restoring, and you're very active in the uh, fundraising for that to try to restore it to operation. But is there any historic significance to the diesel that's there now? Because I know there was for the
Sure.
steam engine, but
Yeah, so the GP9 is a diesel engine that would have ran through Altoona, and it was gifted to the museum after K4 1361 was brought down off the mountain to run excursions in the 1980s. So the JP9's been up there since I think since the 2000s, I would say. I'm not sure the exact date that it was put up there. It was recently repainted within the last 3 or 4 years, and um, it's been up there for the age of diesel, going around the curve now. And on the K4 1361, it is under restoration by the museum in our roundhouse. Right now, we are about $700,000 into the almost $3 million project. Right now, we are working on the firebox, which is very complex. Um, and work is being done slowly, but progress is being made properly, safely, to make sure that it is able to run.
if you thinking about that real quick too, if you have a link handy, do you want to go ahead and share that now where anybody can donate it? And we'll put it on our website because you know, we can donate to it. If not,
Yeah.
that's fine. We can catch that here later on the show too, if you want.
Um, yeah, it's right on our website, railroadcity.org. We have a support page for the restoration of the K4. If I can find it on our website here. Excuse me.
And while you're looking there, I'll
There we go.
recommend anybody goes donate because it's one thing to talk about history; it's a whole other thing to go see it live in action.
Yes. Yes, that's for sure. Um, I am having difficulty finding the link. I will email
That's
you the link.
that's perfect. I kind of sprung that one on you there. Just it seemed to
That's all
be the
right.
right place for it. It's fine.
That's all right. But yes, our website, railroadcity.org. Um, you can find all the information about our museum, about the Horseshoe Curve, and we even have an online store on there as well.
So let's and we'll talk about the museum and stuff, Curve, because
Yeah.
you can go right to the curve. You can visit. You can hang out and watch the trains go as much as you want to,
Yep.
which is pretty impressive. So let's talk about the museum itself a little bit. So,
Sure.
well, we'll start at the curve itself because you have we'll add in the funicular that's there. I almost could not pronounce that, which I
That's all
believe
right.
is still being worked on. Correct? Just for anybody that
Correct.
wouldn't know.
So the current facility that's up there was built in 1992 from a grant from the federal government. It was a multi-million-dollar grant to put in a museum at the base of the hill, and then the steps leading up to the top of the viewing area, and then, of course, the funicular for a ride up to the top for those that are disabled or unable to walk up steps. Um, as of right now, it is currently still under repair. We are waiting for signatures and um, just the right people to come in, sign off on it for it to be in operational use. Mechanically and electrically, it is fine. Right now, we are just waiting for um, the correct signage to sign off on it. So hopefully here soon. We've been saying soon for a while, but soon will soon be here.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the way it always works. There's
Yep.
with that. Now I have to ask because I've been curious. right there at the curve in the viewing area, there's the little stone building, little
Yes.
stone or building. What is that? That's more for my
So
curiosity than anything.
yeah, so that little building is, I just want to make sure I find the correct terminology that it's called. Um, it's essentially just a little like maintenance shed that the Pennsylvania Railroad would have used. That's not the original. I do believe that was rebuilt at a later time. Um, but yes, that was kind of like just a little, just like a little hut up
Oh,
there for any maintenance that needed to be done. Because of course you had Cantanning Point Station um right before the curve, so it was part of that there.
I see. And
Yeah,
actually I'm gonna back up a second because we talked about this before the show and I didn't write it down and I forgot about it. Uh, we do have to go back because there was, to prove how important the curve was, there was actually an attempt at sabotage on it in World War II, which I can't
that
believe
is
I left that out. I think we should go back and catch that real quick.
yes, a I think a I'm not going to say a missed part of Altoona history, but I don't think a part of Altoona history that is completely understood. So June of 1942, Hitler sent nine spies over to the United States. Oh, excuse me, eight spies. I misspoke there. Eight spies to the United States to create damage, cause sabotage, to impact the United States military and economical way of wage war. Their targets range from industrial sites to railroad sites, like the Horseshoe Curve. The two ringleaders, you could say, George Dash and Ernst Berger, um, never went through with it. At least George Dash didn't want to go through it. Um, they met up in New York City, and George Dash told Ernst Berger, "Hey, we're not going through with this. Let's turn ourselves in. Let's live here in the United States." So they did. Berger and Dash got life sentences, and the other six members of Operation Pastorius, as it was called, got the electric chair.
Well, I guess that'd be
So
better than the electric chair, but they didn't get much of a life by turning themselves in either. But
no,
ah,
Dash and Berger. Dash actually wrote a book about it. Eventually, they were both sent back to Germany and essentially just lived in hiding in Germany. They were not well received in Germany. They were seen as traitors by the German people. So they, yeah, you can say turning
I'm
themselves in was great for the United States because nothing was destroyed. But for them personally, it did not help
yeah,
them.
yeah. Oh, I almost think they'd have been better off taking their chances, just disappearing into the crowd and making up a name or something. Than, but
Yeah. Yeah, and especially since George Dash, he was a U.S. citizen. He was a dual German U.S. citizen, and he actually went back to Germany when Hitler and the Nazis took power in 1933.
really,
Um, yes, and he was targeted because the Nazi government knew that he was a U.S. citizen. He worked in the U.S. and he spoke very good English. So he was the perfect man to send in. Little did Hitler or his team know that he had no intention of going through with it.
huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even know that. That's interesting. So, anyway, we'll go back to the museum since that just popped into my head, and I'm like, yes, we do have to
And
actually talk
actually,
about that.
um, I will actually continue that with just a little bit.
Okay.
So it was because of Operation Pastorius and the plan to blow up the Horseshoe Curve that Altoona was actually a target of raids by the FBI. So Altoona had a very large ethnic German community. And it was because of that the FBI came in and conducted raids through the German communities to ensure that there were no Nazi sympathizers or no other plans to cause damage to the Horseshoe Curve or the Altoona or Juniata shops.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. We're the same way over because I live just over here in Somerset County, so it's very, very German over here. I can see that too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, anyway, like I said, now we'll go back to the museum. So, and now you actually there's actually a museum, as you said, right in Altoona too, which is uh I haven't been to it in years. I'll have to go, but it's actually a really interesting place to go. So, um, what what kind of artifacts would somebody find there? Or I don't know if artifacts is the right word. We'll go with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So our museum has a range of artifacts from um we have where do we start? Tools that trackmen would have used. We have a lot of paperwork, important paperwork that like the Pennsylvania used. We have a lot of athletic trophies. Sports was a big part in the railroad and during their off times. In fact, the shops each had their own baseball, football, soccer teams, track and field teams, shooting teams, you name it, they all had it. And so we have uniforms, we have their trophies. We have marching band uniforms. All the divisions in the Pennsylvania Railroad had their own marching bands for parades. We have a model layout up on 3, and we have some artifacts from World War II that the Pennsylvania Railroad. We have plenty of ID badges that Pennsylvania Railroad employees were all required to wear during World War II. And then we have a test lab as well on our 3rd floor. Our 3rd floor did have a test lab in it during Pennsylvania Railroad days, a non-destructive one and just a small lab. And we have the tools and equipment that such scientists would have used to conduct tests on anything from gloves, brooms, light bulbs, to even oranges to ensure that passengers on their passenger trains were getting the best orange juice or eating the best orange slices.
Now that's customer service right there.
Yes.
And you could see why that would be important in before cars became a thing. That was your main mode of transportation, is take the train. And you
Yep.
know and like we said, if you wanted, then thanks to the curve, you could hop on a train and in that day and age, in no time, have been in Philadelphia or New York City or
Yeah.
wherever
You
you wanted to go.
yep. You could have made a day trip.
Yeah. Well, technically, you still can. Amtrak
You
comes
still can
around the
with
curve
Amtrak.
every day.
Yes. Yep. Twice a day. Once around 9 and then around like 4 up at the curve. Give or take if Amtrak runs on time.
Yeah.
But for anybody wondering, Amtrak is the only passenger service around the Horseshoe Curve, and is the only way you can ride the Horseshoe Curve is Amtrak. So you can either catch it in Johnstown in the morning and head towards Altoona, or you can catch it in Altoona at 5 and head towards Johnstown. I've heard people actually make little car rides out of it. Like they'll leave their cars in Johnstown, take the train to Altoona, meet up with someone, and then they would drive back to Johnstown to grab their vehicles or whatever.
I
So
I
you can make a
actually
little, yeah, you can make a day out of it.
Yeah, we actually did that when I was in Scouts. We took Amtrak from Johnstown down to Altoona and came to the museum and everything, and then rode the train back.
Ah, okay.
So, and I would like to say I can remember it vividly going around the curve, but I don't. That was too many years ago. But hey, maybe one day just hop on a train and go. But now, um where can somebody come and visit the museum at? You don't have to give specific directions, but just a brief idea.
So that's all right. I'll give the address. It's 1200 Ninth Avenue, Altoona, PA 16602. We are right along the Norfolk Southern main line towards the Horseshoe Curve. We are right across from downtown, right across from the post office, and we're a big, tall brick building. Uh, you can't really miss us. You get on 9th Avenue off of 17th Street, and you'll see it right there. We're right by Boyer Candy, where they make the Mallow cups, the Clark bars. We're near there, and we're walk over just a pedestrian bridge over the tracks to downtown to various restaurants
There you
and
go.
pubs. Yeah.
There you go. Before we wrap it up, is there anything new coming for the museum? Any other exciting news coming yet?
Well, we are finally nearing the end of a brand new yard project that the museum is underway. Courtesy of NARF, the North American Railway Foundation. I think that's what they're called. NARF, that's just what we call them. They have donated the material needed to construct a whole new yard for us. So if you visited the museum in the past, our yard used to have some rail cars in it, which are still here at the museum. They are around our turntable or in our roundhouse. And it was just a patch of grass in the middle. There wasn't a whole lot of things you could do in our yard. But now we have constructed a stage for events, for educational purposes. We have installed large concrete walkways for families to walk to and from the museum towards the roundhouse. And we are hosting many events in our yard. You can find them on our website. And it's going to be a brand new yard for 2024. We're
Oh,
looking
that's great.
forward to it.
That's
Yeah.
good. So again, I tell everybody, make sure you go check out the curve, go down and check out the museum. I'm sure you won't be disappointed in it. So
Yes. Yes. I love going to the Horseshoe Curve. You know, I went there for the first time a couple years ago. I was up there for the first time. I always heard about it. I was a big history guy. I knew about it, but I never got to see it. And then when I got to see it with my own eyes, I was like, this is massive. It is impressive. You know, it is one of the eighth engineering marvels of the world, for its degree and its size. It's uh it's truly a breathtaking sight. And if you can't make it to the curve yourself, there is a 24/7 live cam of the Horseshoe Curve through Virtual Railfan. They're a YouTube channel. They have live cams at all different kinds of railroad sites all over the country, and they have a 24/7 live cam of the Horseshoe Curve. So if you go to YouTube, you can look up Virtual Railfans or look up Horseshoe Curve live cam. It will pop right up, and you can have it on your desktop all the time. I know people that have it on their computers constantly just to see what's going around.
I used to use that from time to time too, just to see what the weather was doing if I had to travel over that direction to see if it was snowing or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny because we have it up in our gift shop for because sometimes when visitors come into the museum, they're like, "Oh, what's the Horseshoe Curve?" And so we tell them and we point up to our TV and say, "This is what the top of the areas viewing area is like." And we would look up and it could be sleeting, snowing, raining up there, horrible conditions, but bright and sunny in Altoona. So
Yeah,
it's like, all right, that's either coming our way or it's missing us.
yeah, that's the way it's always been in those mountains. They're crazy up there. So,
Yeah.
um, Matthew, I thank you a bunch for taking the time to talk to me about it.
Oh, of course. And
That was fun.
yes, I enjoyed it. Thank you for reaching out, and
Sure.
I'm glad I could do this with you and share some history. I love sharing history. And thank you.
Yeah, that
Thank you
was a
for taking an
blast.
interest in it.
Oh,
Yes.
that's
And
history is
history in
my thing.
general.
Yeah, history is my thing. I love history. So, so all right. Thank you again.
Thank you.